helping with anxiety and emotions, and I think that we can all agree that this is kind of an issue right now.
We have a lot of emotions right now.
Yeah, I'm Reed.
I'm Shannon.
And we're kind of happy to be here.
I'm happy to not be in my living room right now.
Yeah, we have a running joke on our student team where we say that there's Wednesdays and then there's not Wednesdays, and that are our 2 days of the week, because we love being here on Wednesdays and we hate every other day when we can't be here.
So Sunday has just moved to Wednesday for you.
Yeah, except before we could at least still be in the office.
That's true.
Yeah, but anyway, so I think this also hits home for me a little bit because we have members on our team who also during this time they normally do have anxiety. And they struggle with that, but during this time especially, it has spiked. Mm-hmm. Just because there's so many things to fear. Turn on the news; it's rarely ever good.
It's never good, I don't think.
Yeah, it wasn't good before, but now it's really not good. Like, it's that bad.
Like, this is their bread and butter.
Put on top of other bad. And there's some. You guys can check it out. It's a website called access.org, and we pull a lot of stuff from there. They study Gen Z, they study the kids and students, and they pull out a lot of cultural translators and stuff like that. That's really, really beneficial. And right now they're even talking about how in their studies, 70% of students right now are saying that their anxiety is at an all-time high that they've ever had. So that's high. That's really high.
That's higher than their normal in-school state testing anxiety that they have.
Right, and let's be super clear. This is a Gen Z is a generation that really struggles with anxiety and depression and loneliness anyway. And for them to say that it is peaked or it's worse now than it was even before as like a generational issue, mental health is just a huge topic before, but when you have these types of circumstances, it's just an even bigger deal. So we're going to talk about parenting a little bit in that. Yeah,
and I think the best place to start is to kind of split the two worlds of anxiety, because I think at one point there probably was less focus on the mental health aspect of it, but really there's two worlds that you need to address when we talk about anxiety, and there is the spiritual aspect to it, where is your focus. So if all you do is watch the news and look at how terrible the world is right now, and you're not spending any time with Jesus, and you feel like you have anxiety, there's probably a little spiritual warfare going on here, because you're not focusing on the right thing. You're not focusing on God. You're letting the day-to-day control you, and the worries and the what-ifs and all of that kind of stuff, and that's going to create anxiety in anybody. But then there's also the mental health aspect of it, and I think a lot of times we focus so much on the spiritual and just pray your worries away, that we forget there are physical issues that hold on to us at times. Not always do you have both of those worlds. Sometimes you need to just reevaluate your life choices and your focus and all that, and it might fix itself. But there are the cases too where we need some professional help, and there's chemical imbalances, and sometimes our diet and all of those kinds of things feed into the other aspect of the mental health and the physical realm of that.
Yeah, and I think right now with anxiety, there's a TED Talk by a girl named Michaela Horn, and it was super good because it's talking about anxiety and stress from a high schooler, because she's in high school, and she even went about. She conducted her own study with other teenagers, which is super interesting, because she found that she just wanted to know if other teenagers felt the same way she did, which was her anxiety was just fueled by stress. And it was stress from classes, stress from hours of homework, stress from not getting enough sleep, from a mountain of obligations that students have now, which I'll be honest, they probably work harder than I do. It's just reality. In high school especially, with the amount of activities that they have, plus schoolwork on top of that. And I think that right now even is a huge stress stressor, if that makes sense. I think even now the teen response or the student response to stress has always been to internalize it, especially since I'll be the first one to say that I'm pretty guilty of this, where as adults we tend to devalue the stress of students. Where it's like, yeah, you don't know how to be an adult yet, right? Like, you know what I mean? And once you start paying your bills and you have a family, then you can be stressed type of thing. Well, the funny thing is that mindset and those conversations actually lead to more stress for students.
Right, because they start feeling guilty about their stress.
Yeah, right, which then they start hiding and trying to find other avenues to do stress, which we've actually to relieve or cope with stress, which we found even now statistically, drug usage and everything has gone up as well, and self-harm during this time, specifically during this like month and a half.
Which it is interesting because I've seen some studies recently that over the past couple generations, some of that stuff's gone down, but when you add the additional stress, it starts bouncing back up. So obviously there are things connected there where with the stress levels and how kids cope with it.
Yeah, and I know we've had this conversation before. We have not on the show, but on a different time, where we've talked about just the difference now between the cultural. The cultural sins, if you will, of a generation, and how up until this generation specifically, they've all been social issues. Right. The sex, drugs, alcohol, everything you do is like a tandem or a team, or you do with your friends or whatever.
They were doing it, so I joined in.
Right. Yeah. It's all social issues, and this generation specifically, even before COVID, was dealing with a lot of like internal issues like the depression, anxiety, loneliness, self-harm. The suicide rate is higher than it's ever been.
The stuff that happens when there's nobody else around.
Right. The stuff that happens when they're in the room by themselves, and all too often the conversation is always with parents where it's like, I just didn't know that they felt like this. And I think part of that is the stress. Part of it is the mental health game, where kids are struggling with that, and they need to have conversations with people, but they don't always feel comfortable around parents. And let's be honest, like you can be the greatest parent in the world, but sometimes your kid is still not going to go to you.
I had great parents, and they're like, I didn't talk to my parents about absolutely everything.
Yeah. But I think at the same time, there's ways that as a parent you can kind of set up to have, I don't know, to gauge almost, or like you can at least cultivate an environment where those conversations are easily accepted, and they know that if they do have the conversation, it isn't met with, you can be stressed out some other time, but like you have nothing to be stressed out now because you're a kid.
Right.
Or like the violence or silence reaction from parents where you're either violent or silent.
Right.
And kids hate that. Either way, flip-flopped hate that. Right. My parents are very much the silent type, which I hated. I told them
I had
something.
One of each.
Yeah, you had both worlds. Yeah, both worlds. Right. So I think anyway, I think we can cultivate kind of an environment where we try to de-stress their everyday, or gauge their stress, and then gauge their
And one of the things
health.
I remember my parents saying to me a lot throughout high school, especially, I don't know if they said it before this, but when I was going through high school, that's when they called it Postsecondary back then. I don't know what it's called now, but it was basically taking college classes in high school and getting dual credits, kind of.
Oh, I don't know what that's like.
Whatever that's called now.
They didn't ask me to be a part of that program.
Advanced schooling, I don't know.
Yeah, that wasn't for me.
So that was starting to become a thing, and I really wanted to do it because my friends they got to drive off campus and go to the local community college during school hours and like all the cool stuff that you want to do as a high schooler. But a lot of time, not a lot, but on a frequent occasion, enough that I remember it, my parents were like, we want you to be a kid. There's time for you to be a college kid later on. There's time for some responsibilities later. Like, I want you to be who where you're at now kind of thing, and really helping me just be present in my current situation and I think that's part of where the stress comes from is we put so much pressure on, you have to go to college and you have to be ready for adulthood. Like, we're making them focus so much on the future, they don't get to just be a high school kid.
Right.
So that was something my parents were intentional about gauging for me, is they didn't want me to be overburdened with all, like, they're like, you're a good kid, you're doing good at school. Like, I was an A and B student. My mom wished I was an A+ student because that was her gold standard. But I was like, I like having friends. Like, there was a social thing there too. So
yeah, I was like, if you needed a 70 in the class, I got like a 71 kind of student.
Yeah, my dad always said,
the coaster.
My dad always said, what do you call a doctor that graduates at the bottom of their class?
Oh, yeah.
Doctor.
Yeah, right.
Like it doesn't, like,
exactly.
But they were they were very intentional on making sure that I got to be where I was and not worry about what was next and all of those. Like, they were my parents. I think they were worrying about that, although they never really walked me through that process in the moment.
Yeah.
But they were making sure I was doing well enough that I would be okay, and taking on that worry of gauging it for me, so that I could just be a high school student and enjoy having friends and enjoy trying new things, and do I like this or not this, and stuff like that. That allowed me to, I think, in some cases, be successful in the future, because I got to experience it. I didn't feel like I had to go back and experience something I missed out on. And I got to gauge all of that as I went. So I think that's a big piece you can start doing for your kids, is taking on some of that stress and burden of the future and saying, you know, you worry about this right now, and I'll worry about what's next because I'm the parent.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I think too, like, while you were talking about that, I was just thinking about like how my parents did the same thing, but it just depends on your kid, and it also depends on your family situation. Like, I didn't have to work a job until after I graduated. So I had never worked an actual job or anything, like even part-time, till after I graduated. And I realized that not all families can do that.
Right.
But my family said, well, as long as you want to play sports, as long as you do well in school, as long as you focus and take care of these things, then like you don't have to get a job. And they were protective of doing too many things.
Right.
So, which I think it's just finding the balance of.
Right.
I've heard stories of parents before where they're like, I wish that you were in all honors college, but like, or all honors school, in high school, all honors classes. But I realized for you to take 7 honors classes, it would just consume your life, and so I don't want that for you.
And I only
so it's
took
just
the
picking
honors.
like what you do.
I took the honors stuff that I was interested in. I could have taken the science stuff and history, but who cares about that stuff? That's over and done with, right?
Yeah. It already happened.
So I did the honors stuff where I was interested, but I don't ever remember my parents forcing me into those classes.
Yeah. So and I think all of this is incredibly intentional. Like, it's intentional about looking at your kid's schedule. It's intentional of looking at your kids' actions and reactions to their emotions, right? It's trying to sense when they're stressed out and what they're stressed out about, because sometimes they don't even know.
Right.
It's just a sense of overwhelming, and you ask them and they don't know. I ask students all the time, I'm like, dude, why are you so stressed? And like, I'm not really sure, I just feel it.
Yeah.
But, you know, like.
And I think the other piece that was probably really crucial in especially my high school years, but we did this my entire life, was we were very intentional about family dinners. Almost every night of my entire time living with my parents, we had family dinner together. We sat down. Sometimes it was a special night and we got to watch TV while we ate. We pulled out the TV trays.
Oh, no.
Sometimes it was at the dinner table, no TV,
with
no
like
music.
TV dinners as well, like Salisbury steak.
No, it was some version of hamburger. Typically,
always
growing up, like,
hamburger helper.
It was we actually never did hamburger helper, but it was like meatloaf, hamburgers, spaghetti
with meat in it.
Yeah. More leftovers of hamburger. And like
those
are the 3 meals I remember being staples in our family.
Yeah,
but,
as long as we have beef in our house, life is good.
Right. And then, you know, parents get older and you switch over to chicken all the time. So there's that health transition.
So I feel like we're not in that boat. It's mostly hamburger and chicken when we were younger, and now it's like we've upgraded to like pork and everything else.
Well, we did have pork chops again.
Like a bunch of different types of meat, not just.
But
beef and then chicken just sounds like it's not even a good transition. Sounds boring.
Well, it's the health thing.
Okay, all right.
So
fish.
My dad's allergic.
Oh no!
I cooked my first fish at home this past week.
I'm
34, and it's the first time I've cooked fish.
I'm trying my hardest to get you off of what you were thinking.
Yeah, I know. You don't even remember what I was thinking, do you?
No.
Okay. Well, here's what I was thinking is now it may not fit fully into your family dynamic to always have a family dinner every night.
Sure.
That was a high value for our family. We were very family oriented. And we didn't have a lot of extracurriculars outside of church world. So that pairs well with family orientation as a priority. But I think that at least acknowledging a good number of moments in your week where the whole family slows down and sees each other and has conversation together, whether that's around a family dinner, whether that is we're always going to do game night on this night, whether, whatever it is, but having that space where it's like, I have no responsibilities within this bubble. I have something to look forward to, whether I actually want to talk to my parents about stuff. I at least have an opportunity where I know they're not going to be distracted by the 16 other things they have to do, and I have 16 other things that I have to do, and it just never works out to have a conversation. It gives a sacred, safe space for the family to say, we're not going to be focused on anything else. We're going to put the cell phones away and the TV away and all that stuff and have opportunity to just be a family together. I think that creates opportunity for all the things to melt away and kids to have that safe space that they need in these moments.
Yeah, and really, I think we talk about family dinners every week. Mm-hmm. But it really is that big of a deal. It was in our lives.
Yeah, I think we know personally from both childhood and parent experience, as well as all the research. Like, there's plenty of research that talks about the strength of a family that has dinner together.
Yeah, well, and I think of like even my parents. Like me and my brother were in high school at the same time, and so I get for the older parents or for the parents with older kids, it's hard to get them in the same place at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I think that my mom did really well in a sense of like she was very opportunistic. Mm-hmm. Like when she is naturally a gatherer, mm-hmm. like she gathers people together, and she makes people feel included and loved. And so I think that when she would notice that nobody had anything to do today, okay, we're doing something real quick today. And it doesn't have to be like my family tried every night to eat together. Me and even now my immediate family tries to eat together every night, which is not hard because I just have a 2.5-year-old.
Right.
So she does whatever we tell her to sometimes.
You put her in the seat and strap her in.
And she's a great eater, so she could care less. She just like put food in front of me and we can hang out.
Rue is ready to climb into her hike at least 30 minutes before dinner's ready. And
like,
then she's mad there's not food there.
But start with the easy wins, or find the wins that just fall into your lap and take advantage of them. Like I know families that just do a game night once a week, and not throwing shade at any dads. I know that there's dads out there who are superheroes at keeping schedules, but most moms, I feel like, keep the family schedule a little bit. And I know families that look at their family schedule every week and they pick a night where they're going to have a game night, mm-hmm. or they pick a night, just one night where they're going to eat together as a family. So just start with the easy wins. I think right now it feels like we would be asking you to do a lot. But just start with the easy wins and know that it's okay to fail. I feel like right now a lot of parents feel like they're failing because they're sitting at home all day with their kids. And even then, they're trying to make it to the end of the day. Right. And give yourself a little bit of grace because Jesus does. So mm-hmm. give yourself some grace as a parent, and you're probably doing awesome and great. Yeah. And it's okay.
Yeah. And if when in doubt, go to Pinterest. There's like a 50 million dinner conversation starters. Paying you
for this.
I know. I should get some commission off of this. But like, I mean, if you don't know what to talk about, like, look it up. When Alan and I were dating, my husband, we looked up a bunch of like things you should talk about before you're married and things to just talk about in general.
Yeah.
So that we could be intentional about making sure we were having the right conversations. And it's no different as a parent. Like, if you don't know what you should be talking to your kid about, like, look it up. Somebody has some advice on that.
Yeah, and like we mentioned earlier, the access.org, they have some amazing conversation starters for your family and for your kids.
Yep.
And even if you're not talking about it with your spouse, you probably should be, of like, what are we going to do if this happened, or how are we going to handle when this happens?
Yeah.
Because at some point it may happen, it may not.
Yeah.
I mean, your kid may not struggle with some of the stuff, but
well, and I mean, even you and your spouse preparing and saying, we should find out what our kid thinks about this serious topic, and having some of those more serious topics that we're a little bit more scared to have, such as, what do you think about drugs? What do you think about alcohol? Like, what are your thoughts on suicide, self-harm, things of that nature?
What's your thoughts on spirituality?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. All the hot topics that we're like, I hope my kid doesn't ever struggle with this. Like, they're trying to figure it out. So knowing that you're open to talking about it and being the one that brings it up, you might get crickets at the beginning, but at least they know, hey, my parents are okay with talking about this. Like, that's probably going to be a shock factor the first time you do it, if it's not normally part of your family dynamic, is that my parents just asked me about like suicide and my thoughts, and they don't usually ask my thoughts about things or talk about serious stuff. Like, I don't know what to say.
And they didn't even give me their viewpoint. How wild would that be?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, for them to find their own truth. And usually that parents don't realize how much they actually influence their children, but and usually they'll land on the same spectrum.
I know we need to wrap it up, but one of the key things, no matter what age your kid is, the key thing you can do to help them start developing a worldview and guide them is say, what do you think first? So any question, like, it does not matter if it's your 3-year-old. I do it with my 4-year-old. Like, he'll be like, what is this? And I'm like, well, what do you think? And he started processing things. He's like, well, I think this happened. Or he'll make up crazy stories and stuff, which is fine. But he's starting his critical thinking skills. And that's what you want for your kids in a safe area where you can help guide that process a little bit too.
Yeah. So you guys can comment in here anything that you want us to talk about. I think next week we were talking about maybe starting a 4-week series of some sort.
I think it'll be good.
Yeah, about parenting through a square, which if you don't know what that is, then you're in for a treat.
It's not a tunnel or driving.
Not a tunnel. It's not a tunnel or a triangle or anything else. It's just a square.
Just a square.
So you can comment anything else that you'd like for us to talk about, and we'll kind of put it on our list of things that we think that our church needs and what parents need to hear. But just know, it's been on my heart. Just know that you guys are doing an awesome job. We know a ton of awesome students, a ton of awesome kids.
Yep.
And it's really because of your parents, not because of outside influences.
Yep. You're the only one they're seeing these days.
The only one. The only one. So take it easy, guys. Have a great week.
Bye, guys.
We'll talk to you next week.